In this assignment, we're going to go over a little more in depth of how and why the moon phases we see from Earth change over the course of the month. In order to do this assignment, you'll have to download this assignment file from Canvas. If you want to print it and write directly on it, that's great. If you wish to try to draw on it directly with a paint program, Photoshop, or something similar, that's fine too, as long as your work is neat and legible. Though the first page of your file is the directions, you really don't need that if you're watching this video, as we're going to go through this assignment together. You just need to make your file look just like mine in order to get full points for the assignment. If you work on your file electronically, just save it when you're done and upload it back to Canvas to get your points. If you print and write on it directly, either scan and save it or snap a photo of it and upload that to the Canvas Dropbox to get your points. Let's get started. On this page, I'm showing you a representation of the same three objects discussed in the last lecture. This center object is the Earth, and the 8 smaller circles surrounding Earth are the various phases of the moon. In this assignment, our sun is shown to be off on the right side of the page, with the sun's rays coming toward the Earth and the moon from right to left. For each of the 8 lunar positions, we will draw not the half-lit moon every time, but how the moon would appear to an observer on the Earth. And we will name the phase as well. The 4 interior lines we will get to later. Whenever you're starting to draw or picture in your mind the lunar phases, you always want to start with the phase where the moon is between the Earth and the sun. In this orientation, that's the one I've labeled phase A, right here on the right side of the Earth. If the sun were shown to be coming in from a different direction, the phase would be in a different place. You always want to start here, as this is the start of a new lunar cycle. An observer here on the Earth looking toward the moon would be unable to see it, as only the dark side of the moon is facing towards the Earth. The illuminated side is pointing back towards the sun. So we will draw this phase as a fully shaded moon where we see nothing. This is the new moon. You may have noticed that all the phases are labeled in order A through H in the counterclockwise direction. That is because all the large objects in our solar system orbit in the counterclockwise direction. Our next phase is phase B. As the moon moves into that position, the observer on Earth still sees mostly darkness, but a little bit of light starts to creep in on the right side. Our observer sees a skinny banana of light on the right-hand side, and the rest of the moon remains in darkness. This is called the waxing crescent. Remember that the whole lunar cycle takes about a month. So the first 2 weeks of the cycle are the waxing phases, where the moon gets more and more illumination each day. Now consider moon phase C. Here, the moon is positioned to the side of the Earth. We are viewing this as if we're hovering over the North Pole looking down. In this position, the side of the moon facing the sun is our right side. We can see the illuminated half of the sun, or the first quarter moon. we have one more waxing phase. We have one more waxing phase. In this phase, the most common mistake is the direction of the curvature of the terminator. That's the name of the line separating the light and dark sides of the moon. Remember, the waxing gibbous phase is not a super fat crescent like this. It's a bulging lemon shape like this, illuminated on the right and a skinny banana of darkness on the left like this. Our next phase is the easiest one. Here, an observer on Earth, located here, is seeing the full moon. Remember, most months we don't have an eclipse because the moon is a little too high or a little too low to be caught in the shadow of the Earth. But the whole illuminated side of the moon is now facing toward the observer on Earth. So he or she sees the full moon, and we don't have to shade anything at all. We only need to add the label. We now begin the waning phases as we finish the cycle. Remember, in the waning phases, we get less and less light illuminating the moon each day. We also have another change. All the waxing phases showed the moon illuminated on the right side of the moon. Your dorky way to remember that is the rhyme that when the moon is lit on the right, it's getting bright. But as the moon begins to wane, we're seeing it on the opposite side of Earth. So it's actually the left side that is now illuminated. So our waning gibbous looks like the reverse of the waxing gibbous. Same general lemon shape, but illuminated on the left side and shaded on the right. As we go through our remaining phases, all of these will be lit on the left. For these, left means less light. Now, our next phase, phase G, the one that's opposite our first quarter, is going to look opposite of our first quarter. Remember, these quarter moons look like they're half lit, but remember what we're seeing is half of the illuminated half of the moon. So it's a quarter moon. Recall that this one is called the third quarter. This makes sense if you imagine the whole cycle like a basketball game. The end of the second quarter, halftime, would be the full moon. So this one has to be the third quarter, 3/4 of the way around the cycle. Finally, we have our last phase, the waning crescent. As with the gibbuses, the waning crescent looks opposite of the waxing one. It still has the skinny banana-shaped strip of light, but the light is on the left instead of the right. Our last portion of the assignment now has to do with the last 4 lines in the middle. Have you ever looked up at the sky in the middle of the day and seen the moon and wondered why it was up there? We think of the sun as a daytime thing and the moon as a nighttime thing. But the moon is actually out just as often during the day as it is at night. But it's harder to notice during the day for a couple of reasons. One has to do with the brightness of the sun, making the moon less obvious. The other has to do with how much of the moon is illuminated from Earth's point of view when it's out during the day. Let's see how the time that the moon is out changes over the course of the month. Remember that like the moon, the Earth is also half illuminated and half in darkness. In this image, the right side of the Earth is experiencing daytime, and the left side of the Earth is experiencing nighttime. Let's go back to this stick man looking toward phase A. Though the moon is there, he cannot see it because the lit side of the moon is pointing back towards the sun. Our stick man is also right in the middle of the daytime side of Earth, experiencing 12 p.m. or noon, pointing straight toward the sun. Now contrast that with the man on the opposite side of the moon. He would be experiencing 12 a.m. midnight. Note that this doesn't mean that every midnight is a full moon, but it does mean that on the night of the full moon each month, it's highest in the sky and best seen at midnight. Now let's look at the other two lines. Remember that we're cycling around counterclockwise. Halfway between noon and midnight is 6 p.m. The first quarter moon is highest in the sky around 6 p.m. That means that all the waxing crescents are best seen in the afternoon. Conversely, the third quarter moon would be highest at 6 a.m. So the waning crescent moons are best seen in the morning after sunrise. The crescents are out during the day between 6 a.m. and 6 p.m. But since the moon's illuminated portion is smaller, they aren't as obvious to see in the sky while the sun's out. The gibbouses are out overnight between 6 p.m. and 6 a.m. And not only is the illuminated portion larger, there's also no sunlight, so they are much clearer and easier to find in the sky. Cool, huh? Once your file is finished and looks like mine, maybe even a little neater perhaps, just upload your completed product to Canvas to get your points. If you have any issues, make sure to let me know before the due date and time passes so you don't lose points.